somehow that has been getting a little bit out of hand at a bunch of universities, just too much administration. And I don't know what the mechanism is to make it more efficient, but that's been always the struggle. Maybe the public criticism is the very mechanism that makes universities, the administration smaller.
Absolutely. We have those issues, and you can also say athletics has gotten out of control.
Sure. Yeah. Like you said, you co-host a podcast with your son Zachary called "This Is Democracy." There's a million questions I can ask, but just that pops to memory. What's been a challenging or maybe an eye-opening conversation you've had on it?
Oh, we've had a lot of eye-opening conversations. Our most recent episode is an episode on the German right. As I'm sure many of your listeners know, there was a group called the Reichsbürger. I think they still exist in Germany. They were actually led by a former German prince, and they had been planning to assassinate the Bundeskanzler, and were organizing all sorts of other efforts. They do not believe that the current German government is legitimate. They think the last legitimate government was the Nazi government. They see the whole post-war period as illegitimate.
So it's the German far right.
Correct. And we had on a member of the German Bundestag, of their parliament, who's been involved in the investigations or in the oversight of the investigations, and talking with her about the depth of these issues and the challenges they face in Germany. It's certainly not a huge part of German society, but it's a significant number of people, probably more than 20,000 people who are part of this, to me brought home how much of what we thought was the past is still in the present. And I think that's a recurring theme in our show. And our show is optimistic. It's not about woe is to the world. It's actually about taking issues. We take a topic each week that's in the news. We go back to understand the history, and we then use that history to make better policy, to talk about how to make better policy today. And in this case, it was clear that even in Germany, there's a lot of unfinished work in explaining to people and helping those, for instance, in the former East, where a lot of this group has its support, why this government is legitimate, why it operates the way it does, and addressing their concerns. It was strikingly similar to some of the problems we have in our own
it's
society.
interesting that there's a far-right movement in Germany. So you look at different parts of the world as well,
We
not
do.
just the United States.
We do. We did an episode recently on China, on the effects of zero COVID and the protests in China. We've done a number of episodes on the war in Ukraine. Our role each week is to have on either a policymaker, a scholar, or an activist who can help us understand an issue and get beyond partisanship. So what's been eye-opening are some of the details, but what's also been eye-opening, honestly, is how easy it is to have a nonpartisan conversation. It's not hard. We open every episode with a poem that Zachary writes. He writes an original poem. I'll brag on my son. He's the youth poet laureate in Austin right now, and he writes a poem on each topic.
What's the style of poetry usually? Is he dark? Is he...
No, he's often ironic.
Ironic? Like with a bit of humor?
Yes.
Okay.
And he likes wordplays.
So he's not like a rebellious, dark
No.
teenager that's just...
No. He's a creative know-it-all.
Strong words. He would probably disagree.
But what's interesting...
Sounds like you're the know-it-all on the podcast.
No. I try... we do have a lot of followers, and most of them comment on him. They don't comment on me. So I'm the junior partner.
You're the Yoko Ono of the partnership.
Correct. Correct. But what I will say, and this is a really optimistic thing that I deeply believe, if you frame things properly, you open with a poem, you open with questions, not with partisan positions. Even when we have someone on who's a known Republican or Democrat, we can have a very nonpartisan conversation. I mean, of course, we get criticisms, but we're almost never criticized for being partisan one way or the other. It's not hard to do this. You just have to make an effort to avoid the partisan claptrap that we can all fall into.
Focus on the humanity. What has your brilliant, popular son, Zachary, taught you about life?
Oh, he's taught me so much in his 18 years, as has our daughter, who's 20. Two things stand out. He's taught me that a new generation has so much to offer. And I don't just mean because he's smart and engaged, as our daughter is too. I also mean that you realize when you have a child that even though you're doing the same things with them, they see the world differently and legitimately. And it reminds us that the world can be seen legitimately in different ways. And it's not that he and I disagree on major political issues. It's actually the small stuff that he sees differently.
Like in the details, you see that you can have very different perspectives.
Exactly.
Like you have a very different way to draw to create a painting of the same scene.
And then the other thing he's taught me is, as I said about the poetry, the importance of the arts. I've always been a lover of the arts, but it had always been, in some ways, parallel to my historical scholarship. We need to do a better job of integrating, as the Greeks did, right? The artistry, all the things we do, we separate them as disciplines, but they're all deeply connected. This is what I like about your podcast, honestly, is that you integrate all these things. You'll have people on with AI, you'll have a guy doing arm wrestling, you have all these things together, right? And it's that these worlds come together, and there's a lot to gain by bringing the arts and the sciences and all this together. It's an obvious thing to say, but we forget.
Yeah, and it somehow becomes bigger than the individual parts. What gives you hope about the future? You looked at, especially with this book, at just such a divisive part of our history, and the idea that you carry through the book that division still permeates our society. So what gives you hope?
I try to end the book on a very hopeful note because I am hopeful. I'm hopeful that these divisions were made by people and can be unmade by people. I do not believe that what I describe in this book, the division, the hate that we see today as well, I don't think it's inevitable. I think it can be actually corrected quite easily, and corrected easily by addressing the challenges in our institutions, the ways in which this history has been embodied in our institutions, even though we're different, and through our own recognizing of it. The gift of the last few years, I don't care whether you're a Democrat or Republican, the gift of the last few years is that we've been able to see the horror around us. And once you see the horror, you can do something about it. What's dangerous is when the horror is there and you don't see it, and it's hidden. It's been unmasked. I don't care where you stand. I've probably spoken in about 25, 30 cities about this book. Every audience I've asked, how many of you have been shaken by the last 4 to 5 years? And everyone, everywhere has raised their hand. That's a gift. That's consciousness raising. I grew up in a time in the 1980s when we were concerned that everyone was apathetic. That was what was being said. We had lower voter turnout than we have now. People didn't seem to care. My students, when I was a young professor, I'm still young, when I was a very young professor in the early 2000s, my students all wanted to go work for banks. They just wanted to make money. The best students wanted to go work for Goldman. We're not in that world anymore. There's been a consciousness raising. Knowing there's a problem, naming the problem, gives us a chance to fix the problem. And I think that's where we are as a society now.
Young people are excited to solve the problem. Do you think the individual, like if a young person is listening to this, do you think the individual has power in this?
Absolutely. I think the individual has a huge amount of power now. There's a demographic reason. We've got all these old people who have held on too long. Look at president, look at Senate, look at any institution. And we're reaching a demographic cliff. Unlike China, we have a large population that's coming up. So those who are watching now, who are in their 20s, they're going to get to move into leadership positions much faster than their parents did.
Let's go.
So that's one. And then the second thing is just what we're doing here. I mean, social media, when used properly, gives a platform to young people. You know, they don't have to go through the New York Times like I do, right? This is why I do the podcast with my son. Find other ways. You reach millions of people. And this can be done. You don't need to wait for the old guys to give you the check mark that it's okay.
Just put on a suit, get a haircut, and start speaking nonsense into a microphone. And yeah.
Well, also, I mean, have a very neat place.
That's why I love you. All right, Jeremy, you're an incredible human being. Thank you for talking once more time. Thank you for writing this important book. I hope you keep writing, and I hope to keep talking to you because you're the shining beacon of political hope I have here in Austin that we get to enjoy.
I want to thank you for having me on, and thank you for your show. I think what you're doing is so important, and I really deeply respect what you do.
Thanks for listening to this conversation with Jeremy Surrey. To support this podcast, please check out our sponsors in the description. And now, let me leave you with some words from Abraham Lincoln. Nearly all men can stand adversity. If you want to test a man's character, give him power. Thanks for listening, and hope to see you next time.